Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your time. So we're here to talk about these sets from The Penguin. So the
Yeah,
new HBO show in the set in Matt Reeves' The Batman universe. I
yeah.
know you got your start doing theatre design, and that taught you about how to translate from a script and from text. Does it differ at all translating from comic books? And does it make it at all easier because you then got extra visual references to pull from as well?
That's such a, you don't always ask me this question. I love this question. Well, of course it is easier from comic books because the art actually of the comic books is so beautiful. But some of them are just exquisitely drawn. And when you think about pop art and Roy Lichtenstein, how they took, their painting style from comic books, it tells you what an incredible impact in our culture the comic books have had. And so, is it easier? No, it's just different. It's just, for me, it's just a different kind of approach, and it's the richness of the material. And Matt Reeves's The Batman was inspired by Year One, that particular comic book. So of course I bought it and looked at it, and it was really, really inspirational, actually. It was really beautiful.
And obviously, this is set in the same universe as Reeves's Batman film.
Correct.
How much from the style of Gotham that was seen in that film did you try and pull from to say, okay, I need to set my sets within this world?
Right. So that was actually the after I was awarded the job in the very first creative meeting with Matt and Lauren LaFranc, our showrunner, and Matt Reeves. That was the very first question I asked. How much of the Batman would you like to keep? And obviously, in terms of lighting and tone, and palette, we were following on the movie in terms of the kind of very dark palette. So that we knew we were going to be consistent. It's my main concern was that my colleague James Chinlund did a brilliant job with the Batman, and he's also a friend and a brilliant, brilliant designer. But they shot in Liverpool in England. And so we could never match that because Matt Reeves really, really wanted a show to be in New York City. It was very important to him that we do that. And what came out of that conversation was very liberating for me as a designer, because what Matt basically and Lauren agreed on is that we were going to deal with worlds that were not portrayed in the film, but are adjacent. So in other words, we set our story in Crown Point, which was never shown in the movie. And that's the part we're telling the story of the have-nots, not of those who have the money. We're telling the story of the people on the bottom and the people on the street and the people who are ravaged by the bombs and the flood. And that was, as I said, very interesting and very liberating. The second thing that Matt said to us and Lauren was that he really was influenced, wanted us to look at French Connection, one of my favorite movies, and be very influenced by that film and capture Gotham in that kind of style of New York. And once you know that the book was written, that the comic book was written in 1986, once you know that that was the 80s New York or 80s Gotham, and once you know that his frame of reference is the French Connection, then you have a really great point of view about what locations you're going to search for in New York and what is the architectural vernacular that you're going to go for as a designer, which meant always being underpasses, under bridges, under arches. And you can see how much of that we did. And when there was open space and sky, that was rich people. That was the people who were not in the city, not having to deal with the density of the population, not having to do with the floods. And it was, to me, it was a wonderful way to approach the story. And as a designer, really, really great, to be able to create my own neighborhood and to embellish the look, but take it in a different direction.
And you just touched upon the lighting. We're going to delve deeper into each individual set that you worked on in
Right.
another video, going into sort of the Easter eggs and the comic book references for them. But one thing that really struck me with this was how the sets work with the lighting.
Mhm.
So obviously, Oz's apartment is the lighting is very stark and it's very shadowy, or it's incredibly bright, and there aren't a lot of in-betweens. What conversations did you have with the cinematographer and with the lighting department when you were designing that set?
We worked very hand in hand. Darren Tiernan was our main cinematographer for the first three episodes, and he is just a wonderful colleague and a great person. And we tested a lot in terms of like what will the darkness, how do you achieve darkness? What would that do to my color palette? So we did a lot of testing on colors so that I can see how this particular shade of plum, where it changes. Because, for example, in the movie, I really didn't know that the car was plum. It looked gray to me, like a charcoal gray, and so so I was very curious to see, well, what kind of processing of the film was done to get to that completely different shade of that color, and what is my spectrum, and where do I need to position my palette? So we did a very extensive testing, and one thing I wanted to do is, even when it came to Carmine's world, weave a little bit more gold in it so that the shapes can be a little bit more defined. So I learned a lot from watching the movie, and I learned a lot from the testing that we did. So it was very collaborative, and very much we talked about keeping the dark gray palette for Carmine in his world and his mansion, but then coming into a much brighter palette for the women. So I played with a lot brighter colors, for example, for the prostitute, for Eve, his lover and confidant. And then for mom too, I was able to do a lot more pattern and a lot more different kind of light from mom. And then Sophia, the three women, I was really wanted to connect them mostly through a lighter, more vibrant palette, versus the men who lived in that shadowy world. And Sophia is the only one that really lives in both worlds. She lives in Carmine's shadowy world, and she also has her own world as a woman, before she went to Arkham, right? As a young girl, because in the flashbacks. So it was very interesting to play with that, to be able to play with that kind of light and darkness.
You've previously said that part of your job isn't just to throw ideas out, but it's also to help the director and the creative team sort of figure out what they want. Um, how much sort of freedom were you given with these sets? And then how much was an initial concept from Lauren LaFranc, from the other creatives that said, okay, we want to start with this, please build on it?
Um, what the very important the thing that was very important to Matt and Lauren is that no matter where I go with the sets, that they're grounded in reality. So they feel like real people. They did not want to be cartoony. They did not want to be in a Tim Burton kind of look. And they wanted to create a different Gotham from Christopher Nolan's Gotham. And in Christopher Nolan mythology, it's the Narrows, the equivalent of the Crown Point. So they even changed the name of it. So, but we agreed that I have the room to embellish it and to sort of put my stamp on it in a way, and to take it to a different level. And so, for example, the classic example of that would be the loft that the penguin lives at the beginning, right? From the very beginning, I agreed. I even in my when I even interviewed with them, had said that he should be on a lower floor so that we can see his rise, that he ends up in a penthouse at the end. I felt very strongly that he should not start at a high level, in terms of height, where his place is. Kind of symbolically, he's closer to the ground. And I really loved that idea. But Lauren wrote that he lived in the Diamond District, right? Well, and she described the place of that it shows Oz's bad taste. So we had very specific discussions about what bad taste is, because that's a very broad subject matter, and it could be interpreted in many directions. And again, you don't want to make him cartoony. He has bad taste, but he's not a cartoon character, right? He just has aspirations of being Carmine, but he doesn't know yet, doesn't have the taste to get there or the education. So once I started thinking about the diamond district and what was on the bottom floor, which is the stores that sell diamonds, but what happens in these buildings? What happens on the second and the third floor? That's not where the shiny stores are, right? That's where you go to repair your jewelry. So I was really inspired by the idea, by the research that I did on jewelry repair shops. And I pitched the idea that he lives in a loft that used to be a jewelry repair shop, and that his bedrooms is in the safe room where the diamonds were and all the precious stones were kept. And they absolutely loved this idea. And then I pitched it to Colin, and he was so thrilled with it. He really embraced the idea. And he also said something about the character. It had that coldness and shine. And the reason for the vault is that because it's shiny, and the penguin likes shiny things, and, and so it served a purpose not only that was kind of true to the history of the character and true to the history of the building and true of the place. It gave it a very specific place, but also true to the emotional arc of this character or his emotional life and what he is really like inside. And then Lauren wrote the fake fireplace that came from the writers. So we love that. And but so much of it also came from Colin, who came to us with his ideas of bat paintings. And that was wonderful. So it's a real kind of collaboration of all of us, but I had tremendous room to elevate the look. And it went back and forth. There were a lot of discussions. It was a really beautiful, collaborative, exciting process. I mean, every artist should have partners like that. You know.
One of my favorite things about production design is when they take something that, is used for one thing, you completely repurpose it as a film prop or as part of the setting. Where you said the Diamond District is where you go, you don't go to buy something new, it's where you go to get something repaired. Did that influence your actual design process in terms of the furnishings? Were there I know obviously you would have sought out specific bits of furniture, but was there anything in there that was tattered and you're like, okay, no, it would be his character to take this and repair it?
Correct. So what we did is we actually kept some of the things that the jewelry shop would have. Like there's a table that's actually a jewelry table, and there's some of the jewelry repair instruments there. But we also made an ad for the shop. We actually created a name for the for the shop, and we did an ad in a newspaper from like 40 years ago that he has framed, and it's in there. I mean, if the fans are going to have to look for it and freeze frame, but we really gave the place a very specific name and a lot of specificity. And to me, good design is when it's very specific and then it feels really true. And that's why everybody's so taken with it in a sense. And then I think that that's what Colin recognized if what we were trying to do. We were trying to really create a very specific world that his character would walk in and say, ooh, that's me. I like that. That's my loft. He embraced that, and because he was also a producer, I had done a big design presentation to HBO and to Warner Brothers, and had a big book, like about 140 pages of the entire show, pitching the entire show and describing it to them. And Colin loved it and took it with him, and then showed it to Didi O'Connell, who plays his mom. And so then Didi came to my office, and then we started talking about her character and her ideas about her character, and she came up with this matador painting, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful way to work with the actors. It was great, and yes, I have lots of ideas as a designer, but I am working with other artists, from the actors to the showrunner to the executives. And when we are all on the same page artistically, it's really a very satisfying process. And I think you can tell this from the show. I think you can tell the care that there was such a keen eye to detail this in Lauren's writing, and it translated into the production design. And that's my job. My job is to do justice to her writing.
My other follow-up regarding his apartment, especially the bedroom and it being the vault, there's and where you said about he likes shiny things. How did that work in terms of actually filming? Because obviously mirrors and reflections can pose a lot of problems to camera teams. What, I mean, were there any specific materials they used for reflections, or what conversations did you have about that?
Well, we showed everything to Darren. We showed everything to, I mean, we tested a lot of stuff, etc. We tested all the practicals. We tested a lot of things, but the drawers weren't reflective shiny. They were shiny, but they were not mirror shiny, right? And you can always adjust them a little bit. You can open a little bit or something. You can gimbal them a little bit. There was a scripted a three-way mirror there that you can adjust. And we definitely talked a lot about it, but it wasn't a super reflective surface. And then occasionally, if a boom happens there or a camera happens there, VFX can erase it. But I think also I don't think we ever needed to do that because they would just position the camera and light it in such a way that it wasn't reflecting the crew and it wasn't reflecting the boom and stuff. So, but yes, it's a little trickier, but I will tell you the DPs, I mean, we agreed from the very beginning that I was going to use a lot of shine in the show. Like, I mean, I really did a lot of semi-gloss in the colors. I really wanted that reflectiveness when you were in the interiors. It was a very specific design choice, and a lot of it had to do with the darkness too. And I felt like, well, if the walls are so matte, it will just go to black. It needs to have a life. You need to feel like you're in the real environment. So we very much from the beginning agreed on that.
And Lovecraft Country, HBO series that you've worked on previously, from what I've seen from your filmography, that was your first major leap into this sort of, speculative fiction, sci-fi, and these incredibly fantastical worlds as a production designer. You've now
Right.
obviously you've got one superhero series under your belt and Penguin.
Right.
You're working on another Peacemaker. You've said
Yeah.
before that you'd love to do a Marvel film. Is this genre something that you're looking to focus more into now? Would you love to do more of this fantastical side of production design?
Uh, well, I have been very focused in the last 5 or 6 years. My agent and I sat down and I said, I've done a lot of contemporary movies and I've said everything I need to say about contemporary life. I really look forward to saying more about the past period and the future. And I wouldn't call myself a science fiction junkie, but I really like fantasy. I really like it's the child in me. I love fairy tales. I love mythology, you know. And so we embarked on Lovecraft Country, and it was a meeting of the minds. Again, another great female showrunner, Misha Green, and really such a satisfying process to work with actors, with artists like that. And and again, because I have my theater background and I've done so much fantasy in theater, right? In a sense, I've been trained to do that. I really have been looking to do something else and to do musicals, to do just experiment with other genres. And lo and behold, Lovecraft Country gave me all of these, all the genres in one series, And it was just a fantastic. It was phenomenal. And since that moment, I've only been doing period and fantasy. So I consider period also very important to my career. And my two movies with George Clooney, The Tender Bar and The Boys on the Boat, a period. One is set in the 70s and one is set in the 1936. So I love that. I really love that. And I think it challenges me as a designer. And that's the reason why I'm looking for that world, is because it's more challenging to me as a designer. And I don't like being stuck in a rut. I don't want to be stuck in a particular kind of direction or a particular kind of genre. I like to experiment a lot.
Well, you said you're a big fan of fantasy. Looking forward, is there it could be a particular book, it can be a classic film that you watched as a kid that you'd love to remake? Is there any one project from that genre that you'd go, I would absolutely love to do this. I'd love to bring this to life?
I really want to make a movie about the Snow Queen, which is from Hans Christian Andersen. I loved Hans Christian Andersen as a child, and I would love to have. I would love to do a project on the Snow Queen. It's like literally something that's very deep in my heart from my childhood.
I'll finish up this spoiler-free conversation just with a easy, light-hearted question. You said before, after each show, you tend to go on a trip to help yourself
Yes.
unwind, remove yourself from the product. Where'd you go after the Penguin? I'm guessing it wasn't New York.
So I went straight to Peacemaker. So I
Ah,
did, you know, unless you count my 1 week in LA as a governor, I'm an Academy governor, where I went to the Oscars, unless you count that as a vacation. But my husband and I are going to Costa Rica after this one. It's way overdue.
that, that does sound a lot nicer than Gotham, I'll be honest.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But the truth of it is, I also had some really interesting other sets, like Carmine's Mansion, which was a very rich, and it was based it was inspired by a villa on Lake Como. And I had so much fun to like find the right pre-Renaissance paintings. I mean, there were so many other aspects of the Penguin. It's not all down and dirty in the streets. There were some really great other very interesting locations to find and worlds to create. So anyway, it was a fantastic project.
Thank you so much for watching our spoiler-free conversation with Kalina Ivanov, the production designer from The Penguin. Make sure to check back soon because we'll have a spoiler-filled conversation breaking down Easter eggs and each of the individual sets from the show.